Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Brandon. After my father passed away, my stepmother, Megan, made a decision that stunned me. She picked up the phone one day and, without a shred of hesitation, told me she had sold one of the houses my father left for me. She did it, in her words, to teach me respect. What she didn't know is that her little stunt was about to cost her everything. So, if you're sitting there wondering how things got to that point, I need to take you back a little further. When I was 8, I lost my mother. It was sudden, and it shattered our home in ways I couldn't fully understand as a child. What I did understand, though, was that my dad was broken. I would catch him sometimes, sitting alone in the living room with his hands over his face. I even saw him cry once in the garage. I'd never seen him cry before that, and I haven't forgotten it since. At that time, I was too young to offer anything meaningful that would make it better. But slowly, my dad started to smile again when Megan came into the picture. When they got married, I could see a change in him. He laughed more. He had energy again. Part of me was happy about that because I wanted him to be okay. But as a kid, you also know when something isn't quite right, even if you can't explain it clearly. Megan never really took to me the way I thought a mother might. In front of my dad, she kept things very polite. She talked to me nicely enough, asked the usual how was school kind of questions, but you could tell it was all surface level. The real Megan came out when it was just the two of us. She wasn't cruel outright, but it was this quiet, cold disinterest that made the house feel even lonelier than it did when it was just me and my dad. She never raised her voice or called me names, but she also never hugged me, never really talked to me like I mattered. She made it clear in small ways that I wasn't her responsibility. I tried to talk to my dad about it a few times, usually when he wasn't swamped with work or was already too tired to engage. I'd bring it up gently, but he'd just give me this soft smile, like he was hearing me but not really listening. He'd say something like, "She's trying, Brandon. Give her time." Then he'd pat my shoulder and change the subject. It was frustrating. I wasn't asking for a new mom. I knew nobody could replace the one I lost. But I did hope for someone who at least saw me as part of the family, not an inconvenience. The truth was, I felt invisible in my own home. And from that point on, the gap between me and Megan only widened. That was the start of a quiet tension that never really went away. A tension that would only grow as the years passed, setting the stage for everything that came later. My dad was what most people would call a self-made man. He built his success brick by brick, through years of grinding in the business world. He owned a company, and he built it from the ground up. He wasn't flashy about his wealth, but it was obvious in the way we lived. A large family home in a quiet, beautiful neighborhood, a vacation house in the hills that had become our little escape over the years, and a lifestyle that was comfortable without ever being showy. By the time I finished college, I had plans, like most people my age, to move out and start life on my own. I wanted my own space, my own place to figure myself out. So, one evening over dinner, I told him I'd been looking at apartments and was getting ready to move out. He didn't take it well. He put his fork down and looked at me in that quiet, steady way he always did when something serious was on his mind. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Brandon, you're all I have left. What's the point of having this big house if my own son's out there renting a box?" His words were genuine. That was the thing about my dad. He didn't say much, but when he did, you felt it. When he asked me to stay, but as the only family he had left, I said yes. I stayed because I loved him. And honestly, I didn't want to look back years later wishing I had spent more time with him when I had the chance. Living at home wasn't exactly smooth sailing with my stepmother, Megan. My father tried to make it all work. He wanted so badly for us to be a blended, functional family. But Megan wasn't interested in blending. She was interested in controlling. Her obsession with appearances became more obvious as the years went by. She liked to present this polished version of our family to the outside world, always smiling, always perfect. But behind closed doors, she wanted to call the shots, especially when it came to money. She liked having influence over how things looked, how things were spent, and who had the final say. And as my father's health began to slowly decline, her grip started tightening. He never gave her the control she wanted. I think deep down, he knew what kind of person she really was. Looking back, that time living with him after college wasn't just about saving rent. It was about preserving our connection. It was about being there for him as he aged, as he got weaker. And as much as Megan's attitude grated on me, I knew my presence grounded him. I was his son. I was his anchor. And he was mine. What I didn't realize back then was that my decision to stay home would end up becoming one of the most important decisions of my life. By the time I turned 25, it became painfully clear that my father's health was in serious decline. He had already survived 2 heart attacks. Those moments alone were terrifying, each one a sharp reminder that time was catching up to him faster than any of us wanted to admit. But after the second heart attack, things took a turn for the worse. He suffered a stroke. That stroke changed everything. The strong, sharp, and dependable man I grew up looking up to suddenly needed help doing the most basic things. After the stroke, it was clear he needed me the most now. With his physical condition worsening, he couldn't run the family business anymore, and that responsibility quietly shifted onto my shoulders. I didn't complain. I stepped in where he left off to protect what he built and make sure it kept going exactly the way he'd envisioned. I started managing the day-to-day operations and slowly rebuilding areas he hadn't had the energy to focus on since his health started failing. He'd still join me in the study sometimes. We'd sit, go over papers, or just talk through ideas, even if it took him twice as long to get the words out. I could see the pride in his eyes when I'd bring him updates on a new deal or show him the monthly numbers trending upward. During those quiet, one-on-one moments, he started opening up more about the future. Estate planning. It was a simple talk about what he wanted for the company and for me. He was very clear that the business was mine and always would be. Not once did he mention Megan, my stepmother, in those conversations because she had no interest in the business. She made that clear from the start. She didn't attend meetings, didn't ask questions, and when the topic of the company came up in family settings, she'd always brush it off as Brandon and his father's thing. But my dad noticed everything. He wasn't naive, and he knew Megan's disinterest wasn't just about business. It was about control. She wanted influence, but not through work. That's why he made sure that I knew what his wishes were. He trusted me fully. There was no ambiguity in his words. This company is yours, son. You know what to do with it. Those talks meant more than I realized at the time. They weren't just about shares or succession. They were a father handing over his life's work to the one person he believed would protect it. Megan was not to be part of it. That decision, that boundary, was like a splinter in her pride. And though she didn't say much about it then, I could feel it building. One morning, my father suffered a 3rd heart attack and died. Just the night before, we'd sat together in his study talking about work, memories, and even laughing about some old joke. He looked tired, but peaceful. I didn't think too much of it at the time. I had gotten used to him looking a little weaker every day. He'd already survived 2 heart attacks before, and while the second one had left him with a stroke, he never let it keep him down. He was a fighter. That's the version of him I held on to. So waking up to the call the next morning, I don't even know how to describe it. The 3rd heart attack hit him in his sleep. He never made it to the hospital. And just like that, he was gone. I didn't know it was going to be the last night I ever spoke to him. If I had, I would have said more. Maybe I would have held his hand a little longer. Losing my mother when I was 8 shattered something in me. But losing my dad, that took the ground right out from under me. It wasn't just that he was my father. It was the fact that for years he had been the only constant in my life. The only person who had truly seen me, fought for me, and believed in me. And now he was just gone. I remember walking into his room after the paramedics had left and sitting in the exact chair where he used to read the newspaper every morning. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring. I couldn't cry. Not at first. It was like my body went numb. My mind refused to believe what had just happened. Then came the funeral. I can't even tell you how I got through that day. I think I floated through it, to be honest. I remember faces, people saying things like, "He was a great man," or "He's in a better place." but none of it registered. My chest was a storm, but my face stayed quiet. What made it harder, though, was watching Megan, my stepmother, put on a performance that didn't sit right with me. To the outside world, she played the grieving widow role, wore black, dabbed her eyes with tissues, held her head low. But I knew her. I had known her since I was 10, and I could tell the difference between real pain and a show. Her grief felt rehearsed, mechanical, like she was going through the motions because it was what people expected of her. And when the last person left the funeral and the cameras of sympathy were no longer on her, the change in her was instant. After the funeral, something in Megan, my stepmother, shifted completely. And to be honest, it wasn't a shock. I had always seen glimpses of how she truly felt about me, even when my dad was still alive. But now that he was gone, it was like she no longer felt the need to pretend. She wasted no time before letting her disdain for me show. Just days after we buried my father, she began tossing out little remarks here and there. At first, they came off as casual on the surface. So, any plans to get your own place soon? Or, you're a grown man, Brandon. You really should be starting your own household. She was trying to push me out. I chose not to bite. Not because I didn't feel the sting, but because I didn't want to turn my grief into a shouting match. I had just lost my father, and the idea of fighting over the house felt disgusting at that moment. So I stayed quiet. I didn't respond to her jabs. But the tension got worse when my fiancé started coming over again. Megan didn't like her. She barely looked at her, never greeted her warmly, and often made snide remarks about how some people take up space without contributing. Still, I tried to ignore it for the sake of peace. Then one day, everything blew up. I was at work when I got a phone call from my fiancée. She was crying and trying to steady her voice. Through shaky breaths, she told me Megan had cornered her in the kitchen, shouting at her, telling her she didn't belong there, calling her names, and making it clear that she wasn't welcome in her house. She said Megan kept raising her voice until she couldn't take it anymore. She had to grab her things and leave in tears. That was the final straw. I felt sick, angry, and embarrassed. My blood was boiling, but I kept it together. I didn't call Megan. I didn't go back home that night with fists clenched or words ready to fly. Instead, I rang my dad's lawyer. He was calm as always, after I laid everything out for him. He said, "Brandon, I know you're hurt, but right now, patience is your strongest weapon. Let the probate process play out. If you make a move too soon, it could cause unnecessary problems. Wait 1 year, then act." That was hard to hear. I wanted to protect what was mine, but I understood. So I waited. A few months after that incident, I quietly moved out. I packed up what I needed and left the house behind, not because I had given up, but because I was playing the long game. I wanted Megan to think she had won, that she had driven me out, that I was just another weak stepkid who couldn't stand up to her. Let her have that illusion. About a year after my father passed away, I got a call from Megan, my stepmother. Out of the blue. I picked up the phone, and she said, "I sold your house to teach you a lesson about respect." She sounded proud of herself, like she had just pulled off some brilliant power move. And by your house, she meant the vacation home my father had told me on multiple occasions was meant for me while he was still alive. But here was Megan, selling it off to strangers. She went on, boasting about the deal she got, telling me the new buyers were set to move in the following week, like I was going to beg her to reverse it or plead for forgiveness. Then she casually threw in a side comment, "You might want to come collect your things from a main house, too. I'm planning on selling it soon. It's too small for me." That house had 5 bedrooms and enough space for a family of 8. My father built it to be our home, and now she was acting like it was some cramped apartment she had to escape from. I didn't argue with her or ask her why. I just let her talk. The longer she spoke, the more obvious it became. She thought she was in control. When she finally stopped talking, I said, "Good luck with that," and hung up because in that moment, I already knew something she didn't. She had no legal right to sell that house. It was never hers to sell. I didn't waste any time. I called my lawyer, who was also my dad's lawyer back when he was alive. The man knew everything about my father's estate and the way the trust was set up. And as soon as I told him what Megan had done, he confirmed it. The vacation home was part of the family trust. That means it wasn't just regular property that could be sold on a whim. It was protected. Megan didn't own it. She didn't even have partial control. That house had been earmarked for me by name, with legal documentation to back it up. It wasn't hers. It never was. I was left wondering how she was able to convince someone to come by it. She had just tried to sell something she had no claim to. And she didn't know it yet, but that mistake was about to cost her far more than she ever imagined. That phone call marked the beginning of the end for her plans, for her power plays, and for the false sense of control she thought she had over my father's legacy. Because now, I wasn't just some stepkid in her way. Now, I had the law behind me. And I was ready. The day the buyers were supposed to move into the vacation home, I was ready. My lawyer and I had already drawn up the necessary documents and waited patiently for them to arrive. When they did, we informed them politely but firmly that the sale was completely invalid. The house wasn't Megan's to sell in the first place. It belonged to a trust, and that trust had been legally set up by my father long before his death. Megan had no authority over that property, and the law was very clear about that. You should have seen the look on the buyers' faces. Confused, embarrassed, and understandably upset they had been lied to. The moment they saw the legal documents, their tone changed. They backed off, apologized for the situation, and said they would be pursuing action against Megan for misleading them. It didn't take long for the word to reach her. That same afternoon, Megan stormed into my office like a tornado. She just barged in, yelling, accusing me of sabotaging her life and disrespecting her. She cursed, slammed her fists on the desk, and hurled every insult in her arsenal. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. I calmly reached into my drawer and pulled out a letter. It was written by my father, signed and dated just weeks before his final heart attack. It was handed to me by our lawyer after the funeral. In the letter, my dad made it painfully clear this vacation home was never meant to be touched by Megan. He wrote word for word that it was meant to remain Brandon's property. He knew her probably better than she thought, and he anticipated what she might do once he was gone. But even after reading that letter, Megan stood her ground. She looked me in the eye and said, "Your father's things are mine now. I was his wife." That was her only defense. That was the final straw for me. I filed a lawsuit the following week. Attempted fraud and emotional distress. The legal process wasn't pretty. She had to hire lawyers, attend court hearings, and eventually pay some serious fines. The buyers she misled? They sued her, too, for wasting their time, money, and the emotional toll of losing a property they thought was theirs. She was drowning financially and reputationally. And it was all because she couldn't accept that she wasn't entitled to what didn't belong to her. When the will was finally read, everything made sense. My father had been ahead of the storm the entire time. Every single real estate asset was left to me. Not because he didn't care about Megan, but because he feared exactly this, that she would try to kick me out and wipe me from his legacy. And he was right. Now, I could have kicked her out immediately, but I didn't. I gave her 30 days to pack up and leave the main house, as a gesture of mercy. But she didn't take it that way. She tried playing the guilt card. Where will I go? I have no one. I let her talk. And when she was done, I told her what I had kept bottled up for years. Respect is earned, not extorted. She begged. She cried. But I stayed firm. Actions have consequences. And she had written her own ending long before that moment. She moved out quietly a few days before the deadline, defeated. Now, don't get me wrong. My father arranged for her to receive a monthly stipend from the business for her upkeep. That I've honored. And I will continue to honor it until the day she dies. Not because of her, but because of him. Because he asked me to. But when it comes to how she lives, or whether she's struggling now, that's not my concern. In the end, this wasn't just about money or property. It was about my father's memory, his trust in me, and everything we built together. He knew the kind of person Megan was, and he made sure I would have the tools to protect what mattered. I followed through. This whole experience taught me something I'll never forget, If you don't stand up for what's rightfully yours, someone else will take it and try to make you feel like you're the thief. You have to defend your peace, even when it's uncomfortable. So, Megan can live however she wants. But she'll live with the knowledge that she lost everything, not because someone took it from her, but because she tried to take what was never hers to begin with.